All right, joining us now, Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California came all the way east just to meet with us today. We appreciate it very much, Congressman.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, extraordinary times. You have the current president, the 45th president of the United States, saying that his predecessor, the 44th president of the United States, ordered wiretaps on his office. No evidence. Your reaction?
Well, it's patently false. James Clapper came out and said that didn't happen. The FBI chief said it didn't happen. And this president has been the distractor in chief. He puts these sensational things out there to distract from the real issues.
The other thing that the former director of national intelligence, Clapper, said in that interview on Meet the Press yesterday was that there was no collusion found between the Trump campaign and Russia. So that brings to the broader issue here of the investigation that you and fellow Democrats are pushing. What are you investigating? What is the crime on behalf of the Trump camp if Clapper, who oversaw all the intelligence agencies, said no collusion?
Well, the investigation, I don't think, should be about the president. The investigation needs to be about Russia, China, North Korea, countries interfering in our democratic process. And it ought not to make conclusions about what the president may or may not have done. It ought to be a bipartisan.
Did that strike you when Clapper said that?
I think it's a fact that ought to be considered, and we ought not to prejudge it. But we ought to have a broad, independent investigation. Even the president's calling for an investigation that looks at this in a bipartisan way, that doesn't just single out Russia or Trump, but looks at Russia, North Korea, China's interference in our democratic process, and all Americans should be for that. I'm not going to prejudge the facts. We just need the facts to come out.
You said the president's the distractor in chief. What's he distracting from?
Well, he's distracting from an agenda of taking away environmental regulations and clean air and clean water, possibly taking millions of people off of health care. Those are the issues we ought to be talking about. How are folks going to get health care, clean air and clean water, dealing with climate change, stagnant wages? I mean, that was what this election was about, millions of people who don't have a decent wage. And yet we're talking about the latest sensational headline he puts out there. In the meantime, he's appointed some folks who are dismantling regulations and issues that we've had a consensus on for years.
But that is what he said he would do. I mean, the whole time he's doing exactly what he ran on. I hear your point, but I would also say that this was expected by those who voted for him. We want to get your take on the travel ban, the revised executive order expected to come out today. Could be any moment, could be this hour. We've learned that Iraq has been taken off the list of these 7 countries after very heavy lobbying from the Iraqi government, phone calls between the president of Iraq, the prime minister of Iraq, and the president of the United States, etc. Does that make you more comfortable that Iraq has been taken off, someone who we're fighting this war against ISIS with? Is this something that you think you could live with perhaps a bit more now? Granted, we haven't seen the details.
I don't think so. I haven't seen the details, but that actually shows how arbitrary this process is, that if one leader can lobby the president to take their country off. Why are other countries not included, and how were these countries selected? Plus, coming from Silicon Valley, where extraordinary diversity has led to the success of Apple and Google, Intel, that's really what makes America so competitive. I'm concerned about a signal that we don't want people from the rest of the world to come here. And finally, I'm really concerned about the constitutional issues. And we saw a federal judge strike the first order down. Let's see if this one is constitutional. I doubt it would be.
Well, if he takes the visa holders out, you know, it may be something that a judge would look differently upon. I want to get back to the distractor-in-chief thing, because you were saying that the president's actions and his Twitter account distracts from his agenda. This White House would say its agenda is jobs and the economy. And we have a poll out just this morning which says that the #1 issue to most Americans is the economy. Yep. And on the economy, you know, majority of Americans think he's doing pretty well. He's up to 55% approval on handling the economy, and that's growing right now. So, you know, if he's as awful as you say on these issues, why do Americans seem to like it?
Well, I think the question is, what is he doing for the middle class and for working families? Yes, the stock market is up, but have we seen an increase in wages that have been stagnant?
But the sentiment is there. John's point is the sentiment is there. They feel better under him.
Well, I think that it's 2 months in. Let's evaluate based on metrics a year or 2 years in. all of his policies are geared towards helping the very rich. But he hasn't done anything in terms of a policy for the middle class. He hasn't talked about job training. Let me give you a concrete example. I'm going to Appalachia, part of the country that voted for him, meeting with Hal Rogers, a Republican. They have a program there that is teaching coal miners' kids about iOS software and Android software, creating 40 jobs, possibly hundreds of jobs. That program is funded by the Appalachian Regional Economic Commission. He hasn't talked about investing in the job training and skills for the jobs of the future. And that's what I'd like to see from the president, not just a focus on Wall Street and the stock market, but a focus on the folks who are left behind, many of whom who voted for him.
His focus hasn't just been on Wall Street, to be fair. He's been talking a lot about manufacturing, you know, a lot about some of these jobs and just the places you're talking about.
I think the difference is, we're going to talk about that more in the next segment, is that he's talking about bringing those coal jobs back. Others say that's not possible.
Right.
You have to teach them coding, etc. Thank you. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Being here.
All right, still to come for us.
President Trump winning over voters. We were just talking about it when it comes to the economy. So why then?